Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Board of Education. As we do before each one of our meetings, we will have a time of invocation or silent reflection, which will be led by Mr. Kevin Emmy, and then Courtney will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Just like families and businesses and other school boards all across the state, we face tough decisions in relation to COVID and which direction we should go. So I would ask for your thoughts and prayers for us tonight as we make that decision. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you.
Please stand. Attention. Salute. Pledge. I pledge to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And with that, I will call our meeting to order and welcome everyone. I just want to make a note that all board members are present in the room. We are continuing to have remote meetings as we adhere to the statute from the General Assembly and the Governor's guidelines for public gatherings, which unfortunately has limited public access and has continued to bring us to you in this method. But we are glad to be here. Everyone's joined with us tonight. And we will move into our first item of business, which is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes? If not, do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Or a second? Motion's been made and seconded. Since we are still having this remote meeting, I will call for the vote. Courtney?
Aye.
Alice?
Aye.
Marty?
Yes.
Ron?
Aye.
This is Tommy. Aye. That passes unanimously, so we will work from the agenda that has been published. We will move into public comment, and I will ask Dr. McDarris to lead us in that portion.
Yes, we have two public comments that were submitted. I'll read both of these. This is from Jody Huggins, Brevard Middle School teacher, parent of students at Brevard Elementary and Brevard High School. I am happy to see the relative success of Plan B thus far, but have some concerns about a move to Plan A for K-5 students. One is related to adherence to the mask wearing policy currently in place. On a given day, numerous students and staff are observed not complying with this policy. This is largely in the form of keeping the mask consistently below the nose, rendering it fairly useless, and also removing the mask for extended periods of time not related to a mask break. With a consideration of a return to full-time instruction, mask wearing must be a very strict component of a successful plan at this time. A second concern is related to the ability to social distance in a full attendance classroom. Right now, an appropriately socially distanced classroom is only able to be done because of the reduced numbers of students in attendance at one time. I urge the board to seriously consider how our requirement to implement socially distanced instruction can occur in Plan A. This also extends to hallways, buses, and the provision of lunch. A clear plan with serious considerations for how Plan A may negatively impact the relative success with which we have been able to operate thus far is essential to continued success of our students, of our district's in-person education. Lastly, and this concern applies to both Plan B and potentially Plan A, I urge the board to consider a district policy that includes more transparency to TCS constituents, staff, parents, students, as well as the community with regard to COVID cases in our schools. As a TCS employee, I have several times found out about cases at my own school from parents and community members, even those affecting students in my classes. While I feel that privacy in these situations is of the utmost importance, a simple policy that recognizes our school communities and greater communities' right to know is something the board should consider. If I am asked to work in my school every day and send my own children to their respective schools, I feel it is necessary for me to know the situation at each school on a regular basis. Keeping this information from staff, parents, and the community breaks down trust and respect that is desperately needed at this time. Our second public comment comes to us from April Owenby. I come to you again only 7 weeks into this school year, and I still bring you the unique perspective of a school nurse and a parent. The start of this school year has proven to be challenging and beautiful all at the same time. I am so proud of how well Transylvania County Schools adapted to Plan B when the decision was made that we would reopen on August 17th. As I said previously, and now have seen firsthand, this school year doesn't look like the previous ones of my career. It has been absolutely amazing to see students in the classrooms and hallways of schools again. It was great to hear students say to me, "I got to play on the playground today with such excitement." I am so appreciative to have had the opportunity to work more closely than ever with the administration of my schools during a global pandemic. When I say more closely than ever, that means countless phone calls from them per week. Transylvania County Schools reopened when a lot of other counties chose not to. Not only have we done it, but we have done a great job. You have a lot to be proud of as our Board of Education. Choosing to move to Plan A for the K-5 students will probably generate more phone calls from my administrators and more anxiety as more students will be in each classroom. However, this does not deter me from supporting wholeheartedly this transition. I am a firm believer in not admitting defeat before even trying. Since the moment Governor Cooper announced that systems could transition to Plan A for K through 5 grade students, my colleagues and I have been brainstorming ideas that will allow the transition to be successful as well if given that opportunity. As a parent, I've experienced firsthand just how resilient my children have been in such uncertain times. However, my second grader is struggling academically and needs more face-to-face instruction. She is learning as much as feasibly possible on the days that she gets to attend school, but on her virtual days, she is falling behind. The proof that the younger students need more face-to-face instruction is ever apparent at our house. We will be the very parents that will have one elementary student on one schedule and a middle schooler on another if the decision is made to transition. But we are willing to accept and accommodate for this as it is what is best for our youngest daughter. In conclusion, I support the transition to Plan A for K-5 students, both as a parent and as a school nurse. Thank you to each of you for the work you do for the students and staff of Transylvania County Schools. Those were the only two that we received.
Thank you. And as we do during public comment, that's a time for us to hear from the public and take those comments into us, not necessarily to have a time of responding to those. The purpose of our meeting tonight is to discuss the K-5 transition to Plan A, to vote on whether we're going to do that or not. So that's the sole purpose of this meeting tonight. I'm going to turn that discussion back over to Dr. McDarris at this time to see if let me ask if we want to hear from other presenters. How do you want to do that?
Well, we have several things. I have Dr. Weaver, Ms. Ellenberger, Carrie Norris are available, as well as Alan Justice can be contacted. He is listening in, but he's at another event. And let's see, and Carolyn Barton is on the phone. So I think what we may want to do, Dr. Weaver, why don't we talk about the survey results, and you and Mrs. Norris and Ms. Ellenberger can jump in on that. Why don't we start with that as part of our feedback?
Yes, sir. Do you have the slide deck, the Google Slides available?
And you'll give me just a second. I'll present when there we go.
So Ms. Norris, Ms. Ellenberger, Mr. Whitlock, Mr. Putnam, all of us have had different conversations during the surveying and gathering data for tonight's presentation. But this slide deck is primarily focused on the most recent parent survey, the most recent staff survey, and social distancing estimates from the principals if we were to transition to Plan A, and their estimations on what the social distancing would be in those classrooms based on enrollment numbers that we have today. So Dr. Medeiros, if you don't mind, next slide. So on each slide, you'll see up in the top left-hand corner if it's from the parent survey or the teacher survey. And on some slides, in the bottom right, you'll see a note. That note is there because in the creation of the survey, we wanted to have a response for students, for parents with students in the online learning path platform. So we gave them an option to respond that they are in the OLP. So we did pull those out, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. So in this question, what we wanted to do is figure out the comfort level in Plan B. This was the parent survey, as I mentioned. And in regards to our current Plan B model, rate your comfort level with COVID precautions, procedures currently taking place at your child's elementary school. And if you look at that pie chart, that's including the green quarter, the 25%, 25.6% from online learning path parents. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. If you look at the bottom where the note is, 84.4% of Plan B respondents are completely comfortable with the precautions and procedures that are in place at their schools, their child's school. 12.6% of the Plan B respondents are slightly comfortable, and 2.8% are not comfortable at all. Just wanted to share kind of the current climate under Plan B parent perspective. Teacher survey, same question. In this, you have 65.3% of the teachers that responded that they're completely comfortable with their school's COVID procedures. So in comparing those two, anytime you have a survey with a majority result, I think that's definitely something to take pause with and to evaluate, because these are both majority responses from both populations of parents and the teachers that they're comfortable with what we're doing under Plan B at the moment. I think that speaks very highly to all of our employees in the school system, all of the parents helping reinforce the mask wearing with their children at school and helping us keep everyone healthy while they're in school. So before we move to the next set of slides, any questions about those two questions, the parent and or teacher responses?
Dr. Weaver, this is Tawny. Does
Yes,
that
ma'am.
include teachers that are teaching in the online path?
So it was sent out to all certified teachers for elementary schools. So they had the opportunity to respond to the survey. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Other questions about these two slides? All right, Dr. Medeiros, do you mind moving us to the next? So this was from the parent survey. We wanted to try to capture what was the biggest obstacle for parents under our current Plan B model. And one thing I've neglected to mention, we had 649 responses in the survey. You'll see that indicated on each slide. But out of this, I was a little bit surprised. A lot of times we think of childcare, transportation, internet access, technology access from home, but those three were not the biggest responses. The largest response was finding time to support your child academically at home and keeping the students motivated at home. So those were the two largest responses. And at the bottom, you'll note again that if you take out the online learning path responses, 38.4% was responded the largest obstacle, biggest obstacle was finding time to support, and 31.7% was student motivation. So pretty significant. Next question we have for our parents: what is the best educational plan for your child? So in this, we gave 3 responses. One was transition to Plan A, one was remain in Plan B, and the third was to remain in the online learning path. So out of the responses, those that were not in the online learning path, 73% of Plan B respondents selected to transition to Plan A. So 73 of the parents, percent of the parents that responded that have children in Plan B currently responded that they would like to transition to Plan A. 27% of those parents responded to remain in Plan B. Questions about this slide before we move on? Dr. Medeiros? So next parent question: if Plan A were chosen by the Board of Education to begin in January 2021, which statement would apply to your family? So the reason we asked this is we wanted to try to capture if the decision was made to move to Plan A, would that cause a shift into online learning path or a reduction from online learning path back to Plan A? So 15% of the respondents are current online learning path, and it just says my child will stay in the online learning path. 18.2% that are in the online learning path responded that they would like their children to return face-to-face. So I think if you take those two values, you're looking at 15.3%, they're going to remain in online. 18.2% said they would return to face-to-face. And then compare that to the green piece of the pie. So current Plan B path students, if Plan A were implemented for face-to-face, I would want my child to move to the online learning path. So I think when you look at this, if you compare the red 18% to the green 6.8%, that would help you evaluate what our transition would be from online learning to face-to-face and from face-to-face to online learning. So a gain of approximately 11%, 12% in that category, moving face-to-face. Questions about this slide before we move on? Dr. Medeiros? Plan A is selected, and this was from the teacher survey. What date would be the best to transition? And I think what you will see in these responses is that you have some differing opinions about the return date. So the teachers that responded, 54% said they would like to begin the start date of second semester, which is January the 7th. And then 25.8% into first 9 weeks, which is October 21st. So kind of keep that in your mind. Teacher survey, majority of the teachers said beginning of second semester, January 7th, with their second choice being the end of first 9 weeks, which is October 21st. Then our next question was from the parent survey, Dr. Medeiros. If Plan A was selected by the Board of Education, what date do you feel would be best to transition for your child? So in this response, I pulled out the online learning path responses just to give you a true representation of Plan B responses for this. So what you see in this, the 46% is the earliest possible date, which is October 5th. And again, this is the parent survey. 34% into first 9 weeks, October 21st. And then the beginning of second semester was 16% chosen by the parents. So teacher responses, just to recap, their choice in the start date, their first choice in the start date based on their survey results is the end of first semester, the beginning of second semester. And for the parent responses, it is the earliest possible date. So I think you see your two largest percentages, which is 80% of the responses, is October 5th and October 21st. Or I'm sorry, 46 and yes, 34% for those. All right, questions from the parent about parent survey?
Go back to that last frame. If I'm reading this correctly, the yellow says that the parent's second choice is to begin second semester, 34%.
You're right, Mr. Griffin. I'm having a hard time. It's a little small on my screen. The yellow is 34%, and that is the beginning of second semester.
And that's definitely a large number compared to 4 and 16%.
Yes.
Almost double.
And in this, I just want to point out, we didn't rate these. We probably should have ranked these in our survey, but they were allowed to select their first choice in the parent survey. So 46%, their first choice was earliest possible date. And then the second largest response was beginning of second semester, which was 34%.
So Brian, this is Alice.
Yes, ma'am.
So that means that 62% of parents wanted to return on or before October 21st.
Yes.
And if you go back to the one on teachers, so it would be the blue and the red. So that would be about 40% of teachers wanted on or before October 21st. Am I
Yes,
right?
ma'am. 40.3 in the teacher survey. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. The other piece that I mentioned at the beginning was we asked our principals to do some estimates, and again, these are estimates, the best guess that they can make based off of current student enrollment and placement of furniture in their classrooms. What we have here is two different things. One, the blue bar is the average social distancing. So if you take all of the responses that the principals provided at one of the schools and average those values. So at Brevard Elementary, you're at 3.6 or 3.7%. At Pisgah Forest, you're at almost 2.1%, or 2.1 feet. That is your average social distancing. So that's the measurement in feet. So Brevard Elementary, just over 3.6. Pisgah Forest, just over 2. Rosman Elementary, just over 2.5. And TC Henderson, about 4.25. And that's their average social distancing in feet for K-5 classrooms.
Brian, I've got a question about that. Because of the way that Brevard Elementary and Rosman Elementary had to be sectioned off in order to close open space classrooms, their classrooms are smaller than the classrooms at either Pisgah Forest or TC Henderson. So I don't understand how the estimates for Pisgah Forest can be less than either Brevard Elementary or Rosman Elementary.
Actually, and Dr. Weaver can weigh in on this, in looking at this, we found out some interesting things. Pisgah Forest, the way Pisgah Forest is housed, their upper grade classrooms are actually smaller than many of the classrooms at Brevard Elementary. They have very large what is it, K through 2, Brian, I believe, K through 2.
Yes.
And their fourth and fifth, I think fifth grade in particular, are much smaller. Am I stating that fairly accurately, Dr. Weaver?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Kevin, I think also I was at Pisgah Forest today, and I think the fact that kindergarten classrooms have those lofts, that takes away one of those corners of really being able to spread out as well. So that might play into some of the numbers too.
And the next slide.
Same thing, but it's kind of an anomaly in design.
The next slide will actually give you a breakdown by class. So grade level, number of students there, and these data were pulled a week and a half ago now, and the social distancing estimates for those classrooms. And definitely, I think those smaller classrooms at Pisgah Forest for the upper grade bands is a challenge. And the point that Ms. Norris made about some of those loft spaces at PFE is also one of the things that reduces the square footage in a classroom. So give you a few moments to digest that, but some of the variables that we do not know today is once the online learning path transition can occur at the end of this semester and the beginning of second semester, you may have some transitions from online learning path to face-to-face, or you may have some face-to-face to online learning path. Depending on those changes, that could result in some staffing reassignments at each school for either being face-to-face instruction or online learning path instruction. So these numbers could drastically change in January.
Brian, this Alice. In a normal school year, how far apart are the desks? What's the standard distance?
I would like to be able to answer that for you.
I've been in a million classrooms. I should know that.
That's right, and they're all a little bit different depending on the structure of the classroom, cabinets, teacher desk setup,
Tables.
The tables, the independent seating areas, the alternative seating arrangements that are in a class. But kind of keep in mind for K3, the class size mandates keep us around the same numbers each year. And what we have for K3 this year is we can have a class up to 21. So up to 21 students in a class, and that will be our maximum cap in a class. As a district, we have to maintain 1:18 ratio for the district, but we can have higher numbers in an individual class as long as our district average does not exceed 18. But the absolute cap is 21.
I will say when I went to Pisgah Forest last week, the fifth grade classrooms were a concern. The way that they are, so they're longer. So all desks have to be in one areas, but then that left not a lot of areas for the teacher to pull small groups in the back. So it would just be trying to be very creative in how to organize the classroom. That one, I think, that one really stands out now that I see the numbers. That's that is a concern for Pisgah Forest. So.
So other questions for the group? These are the results from the parent survey, the teacher survey, and the social distancing estimates. But Ms. Ellenberger, Ms. Norris, Mr. Justice, Ms. Barton, Mr. Whitlock, we're all here to answer other questions if needed.
Brian, let me ask too. This is Alice again. In one of the public comment letters, it seemed to think that we would be violating the governor's social distancing guidelines by having the whole class there. And my understanding was that wouldn't be true.
That is correct. Yeah. Yes, ma'am, that is correct. That they, when Governor Cooper announced that school systems can make the choice to move to Plan B, it also reduced the social distancing restrictions for that transition.
Thank you.
Which is what?
Actually, they're waived. The governor for K-5, if you go to A, the governor's order says to try to maintain social distancing when possible, but not required.
So we're waiving our children's health and our teachers' health.
I'm sorry.
We're waiving our children's health and our teachers' health by not socially distancing. I just want to remind everybody at the last meeting that our county health director made the statement that the best way to win this war against the virus is to wear face masks, wash your hands, and social distance. I have a hard time dealing with anything when I look at these numbers where it's 2.5 feet, 1.5 feet. Courtney just told us about a classroom at Pisgah Forest. How are we going to win this war? How are we going to keep our kids healthy, our teachers healthy, and our community healthy if we don't do what needs to be done? I may be getting ahead of myself, but I'm just having a hard time to dealing with this, that we can waive the health of our kids. I know for a fact in athletics, if you sign a waiver, that waiver don't mean anything according to law. But we're willing to waive our health of our children. And everybody, and looking at the numbers, you know, parents seem to realize this, that they don't want their kids in a position where they're not socially distanced. As a parent, as a grandparent, I want to do something. I want to do what's best for our entire country so we can get over this. Doing little things at a time is not getting over the major problem. North Carolina's cases are up. Lots of news every night. North Carolina's come up. North Carolina's deaths are up. We're very fortunate that we're in a part of the state and we've been able to avoid all this. But we have not, because we've had kids sick at school. We've had cases in the county. I just have a hard time looking at these social distance numbers. Maybe by January, things will be better. Maybe we can stand 2 feet apart. Right now, I just have a hard time with this.
Can I ask a question? Last week we were in the school health advisory committee meeting, and Alan Justice, if you're on, I may lean on you for a couple of these for this question. We received some input from one of the doctors that attends the meeting. Alan, if you wouldn't mind sharing just kind of like a recap of what we heard in that meeting regarding mental health.
Yeah, sure. I hope everyone can hear me. Yeah, we had a doctor from Hendersonville Peds who had written a blog and had some concerns, particularly our teenage population, 6 through 12, experiencing some anxiety issues, some mental health issues due to COVID. She wasn't seeing it so much in the younger grades, but she was seeing it particularly in the upper grades. And some of this anxiety, of course, was leading to depression, eating disorders, higher stress levels among the kids. And it was at a more of an alarming rate than she had seen in past years as a pediatrician. So we addressed in our meeting some of the things, and Missy may want to share some more on this about our relationship with Blue Ridge Health and how our counselors have the ability, when parents or kids have concerns about their mental state of mind, to be able to direct them to mental health professionals. And with the use of telemedicine, we can get them help very quickly. And so it was, some good conversation that we are trying to address the mental needs and the anxiety level of these kids because, some of them are being stuck at home and don't have the social interaction and stuff that they're accustomed to, that they're used to with schools.
Thank you. Maybe I misunderstood some things on there with even like the elementary students instead of just the middle school and high school. So obviously this would just be for elementary students, but
no, she's experiencing there too, but she was really noticing the upper grades too, that the mental health was an issue for them. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Alan.
Courtney, Ms. Domager, I'll chime in too if you don't mind with that. Just to follow up, we did have a student services meeting and address some of the concerns that they're seeing, and we have had at the elementary level some referrals to Blue Ridge Health, which is counseling that extends beyond the scope of our school counselors with related issues of anxiety and depression and those type things. So they are seeing that at the elementary schools right now. They're doing some online counseling as best they can during those remote days, and then also making some of those necessary referrals to Blue Ridge Health.
And Ms. Domaker, she was mentioning in her article, she wasn't grade specific. She mentioned preteens, and a lot of times that's your 4th and 5th graders as well. So.
Thank you guys for that. So I guess like when we are talking about that social distancing and putting our kids at risk, I want to come back then to that. We are also putting them at risk too for some of these mental health disorders by them not being in school. And I can understand both perspectives. But I do want to make sure though that the mental health, and I know Dr. McDarris has very strong feelings about that the social emotional part of our kids, we have to meet that as well. So I don't want to just say that like we're not thinking about them and we're trying to hurt them or something by putting them into the classroom and hurting our teachers. But I also want to take this though into consideration though too, that their mental health is very important to us right now as well.
I'd really like to kind of think too about the purpose of public schools. The purpose of public schools is to educate children. And my fear is that we're waiving the academic progress of our students by not giving them adequate and appropriate instruction. Do we have some numbers on what people think about how kids are progressing? Or I remember seeing things like kids aren't being motivated, kids are not being engaged in the online learning. Do you have some more information about that?
I don't have specific numbers, and my colleagues may jump in with some different things. I can give you some anecdotal information from observations. First of all, our teachers are doing a fantastic job.
Absolutely.
And when they have students in class for face-to-face, they're getting some great instruction. And when it's online, those students who are engaged are receiving about as good an instruction as you can under the circumstances.
Mhm.
What is interesting is that the participation for the online portions shows a definite lag. Students are not logging in. We have to do, we are doing, glad to do them. We're doing home visits, trying to check up. There's just some disengagement. And then I really like my colleagues to weigh in, but another thing that I've noticed is that when students are online, it's somewhat eerie. There's not the normal banter that you hear for young people. It's very quiet. They're attentive, but the interaction is not the same. It is almost as if they are traumatized is too harsh a word. That's not what I'm looking for, but they're definitely not themselves, I guess is the way to say that.
Depressed.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. I'll defer to my colleagues about some of the things they're seeing because we've all been observing at different levels.
Yeah.
Dr. McDarris in our shack meeting, as one of the concerns that came up among the group was the fact of keeping up with truancy and those kids who have not showed up at school at all, where if they're hiding out or not enrolled at all or just not even engaged at all, are we able to locate and find those students? And I assured the group that we are working diligently to make sure that we have everyone engaged to the best of our ability during this pandemic, doing online and face-to-face, but we're finding it difficult in some circumstances to locate and get kids engaged.
Did I see a number somewhere that there were like 30% of kids weren't engaged in the online part of learning?
Ms. Wellborn, you probably saw that number. Dr. Weaver, I think you were going to speak also. I'm sorry. I think a large portion of that is with our high school students and the elective ad minimum courses that they're taking. Carrie and I did some parent meetings at each of the levels, just some online to get some feedback. And then also I met with some of the high school students to get some feedback. And we talked about some of the pros and cons of ad minimum and some ways to make that better. So for those online learning path students. So I anticipate that improving as we go because that feedback was very helpful.
Okay, good.
I have two questions, one for Alan and then one for Carrie. Alan, did we get clarification from the governor's office or Health and Human Services about buses and social distancing on buses if we move to Plan A?
The latest word I got is what we already have, I believe, unless someone can chime in, that if it's a straight elementary school bus, which about 40% of my buses are, 30 to 40%, then it's recommended that we follow social distancing. But if we have any middle or high school students, which many of the Rosman buses are, then we have to follow Plan B standards. I know that in the last meeting, our lawyer was going to check up on that and do some follow up, but I haven't heard or anything from DPI or seen anything updates in our last meeting that I had with the state director, that had changed in any way what had been there. And looking at some numbers, there was only a few buses that I had some concern about, and then we can make adjustments as needed. Again, we're going to make this work if that's the direction we go in.
Okay, but you do believe that you have the capacity within our current transportation system to make those adjustments to meet those standards?
I do believe that there might be a bus here or two that we may have to look at, and mainly because we're transferring staff kids is one of the issues that we do. We transfer staff kids from one school to another, so sometimes that puts extra kids on the bus. So we may have to do some work around that, maybe add an extra bus and do some things. Just be creative, Mr. Kevinimi, in how we transport kids, but I don't see it being a huge issue moving forward.
All right, and then my question for Carrie, if my notes are correct here, about 27% of Plan B parents said that they would want their students to remain in Plan B if we went to Plan A. Was that correct?
Yeah, are you talking about the slideshow that Dr. Weaver shared? Yes, and we can go back a few slides. And just for info, the next round of applications for the online path, actually middle school and high school will go out this coming Monday, and that will be a 2-week time period. And then elementary application for online will go out at the end of October,
Okay.
a 2-week time period. The goal is by, Thanksgiving break that we're able to set the class rosters for the spring semester. Is this the question you were referring to? Yeah. Mr. Kevin?
I'm not certain. My concern would be that if we were to go to Plan A at the end of the 9 weeks, are there parents that would still assume that their kids would only come to school 2 days a week and then would have online learning those other 2 days? And I think that would put the teachers in a very difficult position as far as planning goes. So
yes, okay. And I think that was one of our questions, Dr. Weaver. It was very specific because, number one, if they enrolled in Plan B, that they understood at the beginning of the semester that it could very well revert to full-time for the semester. So that was part of that. And there was just a little sliver. I think we talked today, Dr. Weaver, and it was maybe 8% that said that they would be interested in reverting to online. And that would just be a kind of a case-by-case situation. Most of those rosters are full. And I can't remember which question was on, but I know it's a very small percentage.
Okay.
It was like 620 cases.
All right.
Yeah, and as far as kids coming from online path to Plan B, technically they have to wait until the end of the semester. That being said, I've really been telling principals, you look at your school, you see if you have room. Obviously, I feel face-to-face is the best method. So if you have room, make it work. If not, then it's the end of the semester like we advertised. There's that little percentage.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Could we also hear from Carolyn about child nutrition and how things are working with that part of the plan now?
Hello there. What do you specifically want to know about? I mean, I have lots I could tell you. Where would you like for me to start, Tony?
I think just how well are we feeding our students? How is that working? I know we talk about sending food home for what we need when we see that need, but if you could just touch on how are we doing meeting the need, and then anything else that you think that would be a good part of the conversation.
Okay. I'm very concerned about whether or not we are adequately meeting the needs of our at-risk children. One thing that was not predicted anywhere across the state was that when we started on Plan B, our children who came to school were coming to school, but they really were not eating. And we literally had classrooms where half of the free and reduced children were not eating. And even when we switched over to all meals, all free, they still were not eating. Now, our numbers have been increasing, and we have been working at this, and we've been working from a variety of angles to try to determine what the barriers were. Having some kind of as close to normal procedure for eating as possible seems to be the thing that is making children feel comfortable enough to actually eat. So where we were doing breakfast in the classroom before, and I tell you, I'm so thankful that we've been doing that for many years. We've been able to recapture the numbers, and the children are eating more like they were normally eating. At lunch, where we have been able to transition to a system of children walking through a line and being able to see what they are going to eat, their numbers have gone up considerably. When I look at our current daily participation numbers, and I look at the numbers of folks that we are serving on Fridays when we do the hot meal and the meal bundle, even though we are back in school, we are serving less students than we were in March and April when we first went out on COVID. So here are a couple of points I just want to mention. We are not set up logistically, or just equipment or anything else wise to be able to operate and serve the children who are in school as well as the children who are at home. In other words, it's hard to serve lunch and run buses out to people's homes and that sort of thing. We also, as everyone knows, have a geography issue in this county where there are a considerable number of children, many of them needy, who are in very outlying areas. And the only way we would be able to reach them is to have more trucks, more personnel, more volunteers to try to set up a completely additional, some kind of additional infrastructure. To do what we're doing right now, we've brought in more milk boxes. My folks have worked 8 or 9 months at really a breakneck pace to try to reach everyone. And the bottom line is we're not reaching them all. I took food this morning to a family who is essentially homebound. The only connection that they have with the outside world is, or those children do, is when those children can go to school. Now they've elected to stay home, and that was their choice, but there are many children that we are not reaching, and I don't know how we are going to reach them. I would love to see a way that we could at least begin to reach some of them before the holidays so that we could have enough of them here that we could send home some good holiday food packs and winter break food packs. Let me just give you one more note. I spoke to my colleague in Avery County this week. We've talked a couple of times lately. And they started school with everyone back at school. They have about 25% online. But they started with everyone back at school. And they are moving forward just fine. Jeff probably has more information than I do, but they've not had to close down or back up in the least. Now, even though all their children are there, they still are also encountering difficulties and issues with children not eating or not feeling comfortable to eat. So it's a big dilemma, Tawny, and there are many children that we just simply are not reaching. And having that kind of a situation for a few months is one thing, and having that kind of a situation for an extended period of time, it is another.
Carolyn, can I ask a quick question? This is Courtney. How are things going with the backpack buddies?
Well, I had some good discussions today with some folks who are willing to come in and help with backpack buddies. I think that a couple things to think about in terms of logistical difficulties or challenges with regard to backpacks. our children are just really now getting back and getting into a routine. Counselors are working with them, and there are certain children who are taking food home from school. We are giving away lots of backpacks at the drive-thrus. But when you get a backpack that has 1 or 2 cans of tuna and 1 or 2 containers of applesauce and some other items, it's a good food pack, but it's not enough to sustain you for the 3 days that you are not in school and the 2 days that you're home on the weekend. We are preparing to bring on more giveaway type things at the drive-thrus. And I do think that will help some during the holidays. But Courtney, a lot of our folks who are backpack kids, if they're not here 5 days, it's really hard to get it home with them. And they need that and more. You know, when we first started school, we started sending meals home. So you might come on Monday, take a meal home for Tuesday. And then when you came on Wednesday, we would give you 2 meals for Thursday and Friday. And that proved to be logistically difficult. Children couldn't carry it all. I had sanitation concerns because, you know, mom may or may not be home to help receive that food and make sure it goes right into the refrigerator or the freezer or wherever it has to go. I think with families working, it's very difficult for them to come in. And we are setting appointments and doing everything we can, but it's just very difficult for a crew to run a kitchen and deliver out to, you know, really more children than they have in front of them on any one day. So backpacks it's going, but it's not enough, and it's not enough coverage.
Carolyn, if we move to Plan A, does that make the logistics as far as doing backpacks a little bit easier?
Most of our backpacks go home with elementary students. So if students are in school 5 days a week, we could reach them. A lot of times we also reach their older siblings that way because they can take home food not only for themselves, but for the older siblings. Yes, I think the simple answer to that question is yes.
All right. If we chose to go to Plan A on a 4-day week, what does that do to your equation?
I think it still helps because they're in school twice as many days. So children who are at risk are eating at school 4 days a week. They could take home a backpack, but they can also take home a 3-day meal bundle, because as long as we're under summer feeding and everyone's free, I can feed everyone 7 days a week. So if I could feed them here 4 days, send home a small food pack as well as include backpacks, we could be getting much better coverage.
Thank you, Carolyn. Any other questions about that?
I would just say, I just want to say one more thing, if I can. My folks were like everyone else. We all continued to work right through this disaster in March. But my folks were nervous. We were reaching out. Transportation was nervous. They were reaching out to folks, and they were worried about exposure and that sort of thing. And I think everyone has those concerns. And I acknowledge those. I have those concerns for everyone, but for my staff and my family. But I have reached a point, probably about the 1st of September, where my worries about what our kids who really need us every day, that's started to outweigh my other fears. I'm worried about all the adults and everyone, but there are kids that we're just not reaching, and they need our help.
I think you said that perfectly clearly. Thank you for saying.
Thank you. So Jeff, I have a question. So if we choose to go to Plan A, and we have outbreaks, which is the concern of everybody has, we know that it could be a classroom or maybe even a school that would move to online only. But is there a place where if we felt necessary, we went back to Plan B? Is that a possibility in this thought process?
There's no rule against that. The governor's orders leave open the possibility for a system to determine what is in their best interest. The options that are presented are just what a school system may choose to do. But for this year, until further notice, school systems are allowed to choose A, B, or C as needed at whatever time it's needed.
And I'm not a proponent of that. I'm just asking the question because it's that, that thought's out there. So if A doesn't work, does that mean we automatically go all to Plan C?
Yeah.
I think that's our
it is. There are some systems. For example, there are some systems this week. Some of a handful of mountain system chose beginning today to go to A. There are some systems in our state that just recently went to B. I think Henderson County just went to B a couple of weeks ago. And there are some systems in the east that for the time being are still staying under C. So any of those options, it is up to the local board. It's basically what are the situations and conditions that are best for a local unit. And this is affecting communities in different ways across the state.
And Madam Chair, I will add one thing is that in the event that there was a cluster or some sort of an outbreak at an individual school or even a part of school, the superintendent would have the authority to act at those particular places without having to move the entire district, short of board acting a second time to move back to Plan B.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yes. Are there further questions for anyone else?
This is Alice. I've gotten phone calls and emails from teachers, and y'all have gotten some of them were just to me. And I think that a lot of what the teachers' biggest concerns were that we're getting complacent about masks and that we have to have another real push for compliance with masks, and that maybe in elementary school there needs to be some more opportunities for mask breaks. One teacher was saying there was just like once a day they had a mask break, and that may not be enough. But I do think we have to fight against complacence. It's human nature to adapt to something and get lazy about it. And we really have to fight against that. And I think the other things that teachers were really worried about, besides the getting complacent about masks, was they absolutely want to have a 4-day week. I mean, absolutely want to do the 4-day week. And I think we all had decided already that a 4-day
Yeah.
week was.
Thank you for mentioning. If I could weigh in a little bit on that, we feel like our system was able to start doing some of the things we did already because of some work we had done with virtual days. And the realization that many systems have found out, and we knew all along, but we know that it still requires a lot of work, is the professional development aspect. To be able to work with your colleagues, to be able to do planning, and professional development is key for success. But in addition to that, we're also doing some things on Fridays in our schools related to social emotional connection, where we are trying to, teachers are reaching out to parents and to students, depending upon the age group, on Fridays. So that's a very important component too that we do on Fridays. And then the third component that I want to mention is Fridays offer us the opportunity to continue to do some really good deep cleaning that we're doing to make sure that we're cleaning all the surfaces possible. We're doing that even in the evenings now, but Friday gives us a chance to really just hit it hard before, at the end of the week. So those are three critical factors that I would recommend that we continue to keep that Friday for those reasons.
I absolutely agree that we need to do the 4-day week.
Excuse me. What you went to about the email, I don't know where you got the same one I did, but I got an email referring to not just the students wearing their mask, but we have some teachers that are not the ones supposed to. And the biggest problem that was described in the email was that they were wearing their mask to cover their mouth, but it was not covering their nose.
Right.
So I think, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just want to
No,
make
you were right. That's right.
it hurts me to know that I have fellow teachers that aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. That hurts.
Yeah. And certainly that would be, that's not acceptable. That's something that we can definitely address and work on.
It's easy to fall into that, but I think we have to just keep saying we have to cover everything. Absolutely.
Yeah,
So,
I think we have always said, whether we were looking at Plan B or Plan A, that masks are mandatory, whether it's staff, students, and I think that's something that we need a zero tolerance policy on.
Yeah.
If they're not only comply, then they need to go home.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Dr. Talking with the health department and others about how vital that is. I will also mention to Mr. Kivanemi's point that we want to adhere to that. The only exception that we have is in certain cases when teachers are trying to work with students on speech, and they have a shield and they pull down their mask for that because students need to be able to read the lips. But that is a very small number.
That's for speech therapy.
That is a very specific situation.
Yeah. So it's teachers were concerned about masks. They absolutely said they had to have the Fridays. And the third one was teachers were afraid that if we went to Plan A, that they would get all kind of kids coming off the online learning path that they hadn't been working with, that would all of a sudden be in their classes and they'd be like starting all over. And so I think we need to be clear that masks mandatory, and we're all saying the 4-day week is what we would need to do, and that online learning path would stay online.
We've been holding to that. Now, what we have found is in certain situations, we have allowed some students to come back if we have room from online learning path back to face-to-face. It depends on the balance and the loads. It hasn't been like a mass number, but it's a case-by-case basis. And also, we do want to mention that in certain physical activities, physical education, the mask rules are a little bit different too, particularly if they are outside doing some things. So I just didn't want to
Right.
confuse that, but
Right.
absolutely.
We just have to follow the rules.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Carrie, what was the number of teachers who said that they were concerned about? There was a previously reported survey back when the teacher survey came out first that like 65% of teachers were concerned that kids weren't as engaged as they needed to be in learning. Is that right? Or did I make that up? You don't know.
No, I think that's what kind of what Missy was referring to earlier, that we had done the survey with elementary, middle, and high school, and largely very much high school, like Missy said, with the electives were unengaged. But I was telling Dr. McDarris and Dr. Weaver today, it's just interesting as far as elementary schools go. It really is different at each school as far as engagement. Brevard Elementary, for the most part, I tried to talk to every teacher, and a lot of those Plan B teachers felt like kids were not, for the most part, completing a lot of things at home. Today, Pisgah Forest felt like the kids did have some support and were completing. So sometimes just different schools had different outcomes. I think Rosamond Elementary has had good success. TC has a very low percentage in online or the remote. So every school differed as far as what's being completed just based on support at home.
Okay. I think a lot of what this decision requires us to do is decide what our priority is as a board, because we have competing problems here, and you can't solve both problems at the same time. So it really is, health is a huge problem. Academic achievement is being a huge problem. So it really has to do with what we identify as our priority as a board.
Right.
Because we can't, there are choices here, and you're weighing those priorities.
Right. And social emotional health is also a huge issue.
Right.
I think looking through the parent surveys too, and reading through the comments, I kept seeing that the relationship with parents and their children have been negatively affected by having them. And again, we know we can't replace a teacher, but they said that it is really impacting and adding additional stress. So it's not even just the students at home having that social emotional and having some of those issues, but it's also then too with the parents. And so that's, again, a concern that we have. So,
right. And I think whatever direction we go tonight, there will be a significant portion of parent population or teacher population or population in general that will not be happy with our decision. But I think all of us are absolutely committed to public schools and doing what we believe is best for public schools and best for our students in those public schools. This board has not always agreed on every issue, but we have always listened to each other respectfully. And regardless of the path going forward, we have come to as much consensus as we can and then move forward. And I hope we will do the same with this issue tonight. But I do want the general public to know, as I just said, that this board is absolutely committed to public schools and doing what we believe is best for our students and our staff and our community.
I think we've gone a little bit off base tonight. We've just gone back and rehashed things that we've talked about before. I think everybody knows how everybody feels about the things. It's no secret. I think what we did come in here, we were going to decide if we were going to do Plan C. Excuse me, Plan A. But that's the thing. We're going to do Plan A. And I will venture to say that I'm probably the one sitting here that really I could probably live with Plan A, but there's some stipulations I would like to see. And the first one is that, from what the teachers have sent to us, is that please don't do it to us in the middle of the stream right now. We've got things going. Don't wreck the ship. If we're going to do this, let's start it when there's a big long break where they're going to have time to rest, regenerate. We start in January, whenever it may be, because the snows may come. Who knows? I know last week everybody talked about, well, can we go in 2 weeks? Can we go the week before Thanksgiving? And the comment was, no, you wanted a break to do it in. Well, I don't see the 2-day break between the first quarter and second quarter giving our, and I'm going back to the bottom line. This is how I look at everybody when I think about all this problem. The most important part of this problem is our teachers. They're carrying 80 to 90% of the weight of everything. They're doing the job that we've always done. And if the teachers feel like they're willing to try pre-K through 5 on Plan A, starting in January, that's where my guidance is going to go to, whatever the teachers want. I've been to the wall. I know what to call. Most of you have been too. So I just feel that we've got to take the guidance, healthcare, education. What bothers me, and Alice has brought this up several times about the mental health. And you know what? Every meeting we have, we talk about lack of counselors, the need for more social workers. So this is not a problem we've not discussed. And I know it's probably, maybe it was 10% before the virus, maybe it's 25%. But that's, we financially not solve. And I realize that. I'll talk to those kids. But at the same time, let's go back and do what we can do best for our teachers in Transylvania County. The 4 days, they need a break. We need to clean schools. And I think, like I said, Christmas gets here, we'll have 2 weeks off. We can regenerate and come back in full force.
Marty, let me say, Marty, let me say my concern with waiting to second semester is twofold. One, all the health experts say that most likely there will be a second surge of the vaccine, of the virus, that in every pandemic since 1918, there has been a resurgence. Also coupled with that would be the onset of flu season. And the symptoms of COVID and regular flu are so similar, and with not yet having widespread availability of quick turnaround tests, that we would be shutting down classrooms and shutting down schools because of regular flu rather than COVID. So, I think we need to get in as many instructional days in this school year as we can.
I have a problem with that. You're talking about something that might happen. So explain to me why we should switch around and go 4 weeks and have Thanksgiving break, 4 weeks have Christmas break. We got to come back and finish the semester in January. And during this time period, it's a change where we come back in January. And if we have a surge, there is not anything we can do about it except pray that it's going to go away. And you put the time, and again, and this last thing I would say, bottom line is, how do you know we're not going to have a surge at Halloween? Thanks, Chris.
And that's true. But I understand what Ron's saying.
And the last thing I want to mention is we're dealing with health that can lead to death.
I just haven't said a whole lot, but I would add a little bit maybe to what Ron said. When we came the beginning of the year to make a decision, we were going to go with C or we were going to go with Plan B. one of my concerns at that time was how much time are our students going to spend out of the classroom and how much instructional time are they going to miss? And I know our teachers are doing a fantastic job on the virtual learning, and I appreciate everything they've done for that. But and Marty's right, we can't predict what's going to happen in the future. But if we do have a classroom, a school, or heaven forbid our system go back into a situation where we're all virtual again, then how much time have we lost? You can make a scenario real quick where you have students who have been out of the classroom more than they've been in the classroom for a whole instructional year plus last year. And it worries me. A lot of it worries me. The health, our teachers, what we're asking them to do, and the health of our students, absolutely. But it worries me too, how far behind are they going to be, especially at the elementary school level, because that's where you're building the foundation that they're going to continue their education through for those elementary years and on into high school. So those are just some of my concerns that I struggle with.
This is Alice. Just, I'm an elementary person. That's my thing. And if you look at kids left school in March, if you were in kindergarten, you left school in March, so you had 3 quarters that year. This year, you go back, say, in January, and maybe you get in 2 quarters in January. You're going to go to 2nd grade having just a little over 1 year of instruction in school. And that really, really worries me. This is when you're learning to read and write, you're doing your basic skills. You don't get this time back, folks. That's why elementary worries me much more than middle or high, because they're learning what they're going to use the rest of their lives. So I am extremely concerned about the amount of instructional time that elementary school children are losing. And face-to-face instruction is absolutely necessary for little kids. It's just absolutely necessary. I mean, we have people doing fabulous online instruction. I've seen what Sabrina Shook is doing, for example, but it's not face-to-face instruction. And it just worries me tremendously that we could have kids going to 2nd grade who have basically not been in school, but
Well, let me when they test when they lose 14 days, they're going to lose 14 days. So we do them.
What teachers have always done, catch them up as best as they can when they come back.
Yeah, we come back. Our teachers get people up.
they can't catch them up for 5 months of instruction.
They can't.
That's really unfair, Marty. Really unfair.
I know.
Don't start that.
Okay.
Don't start
Yeah,
that.
I think let's not turn this into something we don't typically do in our meetings.
Okay, Madam Chair, I'm ready to make a motion if that's appropriate, or does there need to be more discussion?
I think it would be appropriate.
Okay, I would move then that we move to a 4-day plan, beginning to start the second 9 weeks, with our concern about mask wearing being reinforced to all employees and students.
Jenny, did you get on that?
Yeah, very good, Jenny.
The only clarification, maybe just for the record, that's K5,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Plan A.
K5 for Plan A, yes.
Thank you. And there's a motion's been made, properly seconded, and there will be time for further discussion.
Jeff, do you have a recommendation, or does Carrie or Brian have a recommendation, what you think would be best?
Recommendation, say the second part again. I think these things, masks, sometimes I don't hear as well. So.
Do you or Brian or Carrie, or do you guys have any recommendation that you would like to give us before we go?
Well, I will just simply say, and it's going to sound like I'm passing the buck, so to speak, but that's not true at all. We pride ourselves on making things work. We feel like we are leaders in our state, our system, collectively, all of us together. And so we make things work. I do believe that we are positioned to maintain a safe environment because of our strong partnership with the health department. And we will absolutely, definitely, tomorrow morning, reiterate some of our concerns about mask wearing and all of that. Teachers are incredibly resilient, and they will social distance in their classrooms to the extent possible. And I have been very proud, not only of our teachers, but I've been very proud of our students, because the majority are wearing their masks. When you watch them in the hall, the overwhelming majority. So I'm very proud of that. So we will definitely make it work. I too am concerned not only about their health and safety, but I'm also concerned about the fact that they are not receiving instruction. We didn't go into it here, but there are instances, unfortunately, in our county, and other counties have them too, but there are instances in our county where there are students that are not in a safe environment at home. And those are the types of things that wake me up at night. And so we will, whatever the decision the board makes, and if it's plan A, we will absolutely make it work to the very best of our ability. And if something happens, we will regroup and we will make sure that we're doing it right in every case.
Thank you.
Is there further discussion? I just want to, and you said it, and Ron said it, everybody said it. I just want to be sure that there's a very clear understanding that is the expectation from the board, that whatever plan we're under at whatever time, the policy is to be followed. And anyone coming into our schools, for whatever reason, is to also follow that policy.
And the temperatures. I think that same teacher said people weren't always taking temperatures.
Exactly.
They need to get back to that.
That needs to be followed with no exception.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's a motion on the floor that's been made, properly seconded, so I will call for the vote if there's no further discussion. Courtney?
Aye.
Alice?
Aye.
Marty?
No.
Ron?
Aye.
Mr. Tom? Aye. And that motion would pass. That being the only reason for the meeting tonight, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. I'll take a vote for that. Courtney?
Aye.
Alice?
Aye.
Marty?
Yes.
Ron?
Aye.
Connie? Aye. We will consider ourselves adjourned. Thank you to everyone in attendance tonight and to everyone who joined us, and we just ask you to keep our schools in our thoughts and prayers. Thank you.